Um, okay. Now, I wasn't sure why I was going to make a video about this, but hey, I decided to do a video anyway. Yeah, you read the title. I've never dated a African woman. I don't like to use the term black or white. It's just stupid, and I think we should remove that out of our system. You know, um, so that's why I never use the term black or white. For me, I use the term African when I address people that are African descendant. I call them African or African descendant. And when I look at Europeans, or as you would call them whites, I prefer to say European or European descendant people, because these terms, we have to get rid of them. And I'm not saying I'm doing the correct thing, but I want to make a step in the right direction. So that's why I use the terms that I use. So yeah, sometimes people are watching and you get distracted, and I get distracted by so many things. Sometimes you see a butterfly and you just stop and stare because it's beautiful to look at. Same thing with people. But yeah, I've never dated a African woman, and yeah, I'll tell you why. And it saddens me to say this, that I've never. But then I remember a interview with D.L. Hughley. Shouts out to D.L. Hughley, and shout out to Vlad TV for giving me that perspective. That D.L. Hughley said, in an interview with Vlad, I've never dated a white woman, but not because I didn't want to. I'm using his words, not mine. So when I phrase someone, just so you know. And I've never dated an African woman, but not because I didn't want to. I was raised in on an island where, the predominant people were Africans, African descendants, in the Caribbean world. But yeah, I knew I was always different, but I didn't know that different would be wrong. And for many of my peers where I was surrounded with at the time, being different meant being wrong. I remember just I was an insecure little kid as well, so I have to be honest there. I wouldn't ask a girl out, because every time I would ask a girl out, I would be very much disappointed all the time. But in my class, I remember that I wasn't really in with the girls in my class, because a lot of African women wouldn't see me as being one of them. I remember, all right, this was an instance, I'm not bothered with it now, but I do have to say that yeah, when I asked a girl out, she told me she would not date me because in her eyes I was too white. And I was 16 at the time, a very insecure little kid, and I just brushed it off, and I said something not so nice back to her, but that did stuck with me. And as I grew older, I did get the realization that, a lot of African people in the United States, but also, in Europe, because I lived in Europe for 6 years, and I've always admired, the African American way of representing culture. I was always very curious, but I wasn't a hip hop fan in the beginning, so that's a whole other video. But yeah, that stuck with me because, there is around the world a perception about how African descended people, depending on which part of the globe you live, are supposed to act. And if you act any different from that cultural perception of where you're located globally, you're being seen as weird or non-African enough, depending on where you are at the globe. And that really stuck with me. That really stuck with me because I couldn't understand at the beginning. But then as I grew older, like I said, I found out that there was a perception about what African really means, depending on where you are at the globe. And if you deviated from that set standards, you would be seen as different. All right, I gotta tell you a story. All right, about a friend of mine. All right, his name is Angelo. All right, if you're watching this right now, Angelo, your stories have really inspired me, and this is one of those reasons why I made this video. He told me that, he couldn't be himself around his other African peers, because if he deviated from the set standards how African people in the globe are perceived, if you deviated from that, you know what they said to him? They said to him he should act his race. Isn't that just, I have no other words for it. Isn't that just barbarically hypocritical? That there are African people that complain about the European standards of how Africans should behave, depending on where you are at the globe. But that they infuse those same standards of how Africans in the West or in Europe or anywhere else in the globe should behave. If you deviate from those same standards, you're being seen as not African enough, or you're not being seen as quote unquote black enough. All right? Again, I hate using those words, but sometimes I have to use the words of society to reflect society's issues. So if you hear me ever using that term, that's really the only reason why I use that. But don't you find it strange that Africans are complaining about certain standards of perception that has been done by Western society, by European descendants as a society in general? And I'm not saying that's not wrong. It is very wrong, and we have to actively work together to change that. However, we cannot change that if we put those same standards created by Europeans onto each other. Because what are we doing? We're keeping each other trapped. We're keeping each other from moving forward, and from certain people who probably possess a lot of great talent, like my great little brother Angelo, all right, from being their true, authentic selves, and create a future and create a paved way of success that we might never know, because we keep each other trapped in these societal standards. And we cannot ask European descendants to change the way they view our Africans if we keep each other trapped in that same cycle that's been created in the past. Because if we keep circling around how you should behave according to your neighborhood, or according to your country, or according to your set culture and norms and values, and I'm not saying you should get rid of them, but really reevaluate and assess them, because in this great big world there are so many perspectives and there are so many ways of looking at things that if you're not open enough to receive them, instead of those cultures helping you embrace who you are, they might keep you away from being your full authentic self. And that's a real shame. I've had that done to me in the past, and when my brother Angelo told me that story, wow, I saw myself and my reflection back in him. I knew what he was going through. I felt what he was going through, because I've been in that same boat. So So when it comes to dating, coming back to, why I've never dated an African woman before, I really wanted to. I'm going to tell you, though, a funny story. That there was this one African girl. Her name was Geraldine. Honestly, the first time I saw her, I thought she was a model. Like, really, that's what she looked like. She looked like an absolute model. But I was an insecure kid at the time, so even if that other girl didn't say what she said, I probably never would have had the courage to ask her out. But having that stigma put on me on a very early age, it does influence our thought process. And when people are saying that, whether it's African men or African women or dating outside their tribal visual group, it's probably, maybe it's also because they don't feel like they really have a say in their tribal visual group. I most certainly didn't, when I was a teenager, and it wasn't until I started traveling to the UK in London where I had a totally different perspective on that. But that's another video for another time. But yeah, that's really why I've never been with an African woman before. So yeah, but that's gonna change, I feel. Yeah. Because I'm finally myself.